everyone. Well, it's the depths of winter here, and I know it is for many of you as well. And it might seem like there's not really a lot we can do in our garden right now, but the other day I realized right now is when most of the decisions I make for my garden happen. Probably in terms of ideas and planning, this is the time when I'm busier in the garden than any other time of the year. So because I get a lot of questions from people about how to start with design or how you start with ideas for your garden, I thought I'd sort of just tell you about some of the things that I'm working on right now, at least in my head or planning for, or even in some cases shopping for. Because what I do now really sets the stage for everything that happens for the rest of the gardening year. So a lot of what I'm doing at this time of year is just reviewing what last year's garden was like in areas that either need adjustment or change or rethinking, or maybe even things that worked really well that I'm making a note of to either repeat those things or expand on those or take those somewhere else in the garden. Of course, in order to do this, I reflect a little bit upon sort of my thoughts at the time, although honestly, when I'm in the middle of the gardening season, I am more focused on the short term. So it's not until I have reflected on things a little bit that I often recognize some little issues that I want to tweak, and that's where photos come in. I can't stress the importance of snapping photos of your garden. Just take them. Honestly, the ones I look through the most, even though I do take good pictures of my garden. I get up early in the morning to try to take some really nice photos of my garden. The ones that I find myself referring back to are just the quick snaps on my phone. So I'm just flipping through my phone camera reel just to see what's on there. So for instance, I've been thinking about what I call the patio bed. This is the garden where I plant most of my dahlias that is just off our patio, and certainly the garden that I see the most is closest to the house, and I think is the garden that most people sort of associate. When they think of my garden, I think this is the part of my garden that they sort of most associate with me. And there is a corner of it that has always sort of bugged me. It's kind of the southeast corner of that garden, which you see honestly more from the driveway than you see from the patio, at least at this point. And I've been kind of tucking dahlias back there, but honestly they don't grow that well. And I don't think it's necessarily sun. It's certainly part sun, maybe not full sun in that corner, but it's certainly part sun, and dahlias do fine in part sun. I think what it is that I'm not back there. Not that it's that far away, but it's a little hard to get to. And I think what it is that I'm just not close enough to that to throw some water on there when I'm thinking of it. I basically plant them, water them a little, and then walk away. And so they don't really thrive. I'm not great about staking them up. If they need that, I will stake them once, but not return. It's more neglect than it is anything wrong with the dahlias. So I think I'm just not enthusiastic about growing dahlias in that particular little spot. So what I've realized is that I need height in that corner. I never wanted to make anything too high on either side of that garden because I wanted it to be viewed from both sides. But that part of the garden is just kind of falls off and there's not much happening there. So one of the plants I've been looking at for that is Gastacky. I saw a fabulous version of it in a garden this summer, probably 2 miles from my house. It was not Blue Fortune. It was a different one. She didn't know exactly what it was. I think it was actually one of the species ones. It was quite tall. It was really spectacular. And I thought, you know what, it's time for me to go back and revisit Gastacky. I've not had great luck with it. And here in Zone 5, we are really limited on the ones we can grow. A lot of the really fun new ones that have come out are really for Zone 6 and above. And you really can't fudge it here. I know plenty of people have tried it and have not had luck overwintering those. But I am thinking an Gastacky might be nice. I'm looking for something with a kind of longer, skinnier flower, since there are so many dahlias and ball-shaped dahlias, and then I've got the flat flowers of the hydrangea serrata tough stuff in there. I think that what we need here is something with a different flower shape, and that's where I landed at Gastacky. There are also some spots in that garden that are actually a little shady. Now, it's a southern exposure, but if you know that garden, you know that there is a huge row of cedar trees that are actually in my neighbor's yard that border our garden, but they block a lot of the direct sun from the south on that side of that garden. So there, especially when there's other plants kind of on either side of them, there's little, less sunny spots back there. And I was thinking that I really discovered Persicarias. Persicarias are a misunderstood plant group. There are some real bad actors amongst the Persicarias. and they do move a little. There are some that you should stay far away from and you never want to meet up with. But last year I planted that golden arrow Persicaria in the new garden, and I've just really discovered this whole world of Persicarias that I've been missing out on. And those can go into a shadier situation, like certainly part sun and part shade. So I thought maybe putting some Persicarias around in there might be great, because again, those have a different flower form than what's in there. So this is my thought process for that garden. Now, sometimes to have a better idea of what's happening in our garden, we have to see it from a different perspective. And I got a moment of that when I saw the drone footage from when Roy Diblick was here and we were doing the site visit for the new garden. Some drone footage went by in sort of the area that's kind of northwest of the house, where I had redesigned that bed. I made a big fuss about telling you guys about it. I never really showed you how I actually bumped out that bed. But that bed line had been bothering me for years. Well, now I saw it from the sky and it's still bothering me. So I need to make some adjustments there. And I think what happened there is that last year I was resistant. I didn't have the time to put in a lot of work to change things around. And so there is a path that leads to this bridge through this garden. And I didn't really want to have to redo that whole path. I relaid a few stones. We did extend it a little bit. I relayed a few stones. One of the things I noticed when I had a garden tour here in late summer was that not a single person wanted to walk on that path. Even the path, I have no problem with it, but the path looked rickety. None of these people, I mean, I could just tell. I mean, some of these people were a little older, and I could just tell that every one of them went, I'm not walking on those stones. Those don't look stable. And they're not wrong. It's on a little bit of a slope. So one of the things I've been thinking about is how we can, A, fix that bed line, which I've got a pretty good idea of how to make that happen, but it will require making that path a little longer. The path also comes out straight from that bridge, and I think maybe curving it a little might make it a little bit more interesting, but what I really need is to not have it on a slope. It's enough, it's not a big enough slope that you struggle to get up it by any means, but it's enough of a slope that you find yourself pushing forward when you're walking up it. So I'm thinking about reinventing that entire area, taking out those stones altogether, and maybe putting in two steps with long stretches of leveled ground in between them. I'm not sure. This is all in the idea phase at this point, but like I said, this is where these ideas sort of start percolating in January, and there's nothing I can do about it till spring anyway, so there's no need to rush into a decision on what I want to do. But when I start thinking about this, I become more aware of other paths. I find myself seeking, when I see pictures of gardens, I look, hey, do they have a path that needs some steps in it? What do those look like? And so that's how these processes start. So it's a good chance that you'll see some changes in that little part of the garden. Sometimes, of course, things change that we don't expect to change, and we have to adjust because of that. And one of those things is that our neighbor across our little road, it's more of a lane, it's a one lane, it's a gravel road, has taken down all of the trees on their property. They were primarily ash trees that were dead because we've had emerald ash borer has decimated all ash trees in our area. But it's such a big property and so many trees that them being gone makes a really big difference. And what I find is that the driveway garden that I made in 2018, which consists of now 3 plants, pagoda dogwood, dwarf Alberta spruce, and Hacklencloa macra. This is where I had the boxwood blight last year and took out the boxwoods, which I don't miss from that garden at all. That Hacklencloa macra has grown so well. It would have been years before we would ever actually see those boxwoods again. So as it turns out, I never had to replace those. But now that garden, which had previously been, part sun to basically part sun, even going into part shade on occasion, is now potentially in a lot of sun. And I don't know if that Hacklencloa macra is going to appreciate that. I think the pagoda dogwoods will be able to tolerate it. I'm not sure about the Hacklencloa. Now, I'm not going to rip out that Hacklencloa. It is the most impressive stand of Hacklencloa I've probably ever seen. And it certainly likes where it is. But I am on notice that I might have to change some things there. The other thing that we might have to change there is those dwarf Alberta spruces. When we chose those plants for that garden, we had to deal with a part sun situation. We also had to deal with evergreens that wouldn't get too tall because there are power lines right above that. So how do you find, evergreens don't stop growing. They give you a height on these, but it's not like they hit that height and then never grow again. That's their height in, say, 10 years, but they will keep growing a little bit beyond that. And I just didn't want to be in the situation where we planted evergreens there and then had to top them because they were going to run into the power lines. So we planted those dwarf Alberta spruces, which will top out at 8 to 10 feet, and we actually planted them up on a little berm. But now that all those trees are gone at our neighbors, we clearly see our neighbor's house. And if there is going to be more sun there, we might have an opportunity to plant a different, slightly taller evergreen there, because our options were really limited by that part sun situation that we had over there. So probably nothing will happen with that area this year, but it is an area that I'm watching because the conditions have changed for it and we'll have to adjust to that in the future. I'm sure it'll be fine for 1 year, but this year I'm going to spend a lot of time taking note of that and also rolling around with ideas in my head for what changes we can make over there, in particular in relation to those trees that are there. Now, speaking of trees, we've obviously been losing trees ourselves over the years because of the emerald ash borer situation. And we've got some other trees that are just getting old, so they're not going to live forever. And so we want to be planting trees now proactively so that, when those trees are gone, there's something there that's fairly mature to take over those spots. I love to plant some trees in our woods where we've lost a few things. Bare root trees work very well there because we don't have to dig that big of a hole, which can be a problem when there are other mature trees around. And I'm really trying to diversify the trees we have here. This emerald ash borer situation has really taught me the importance of a diverse planting, because areas that are bare, like my neighbor's yard now, wouldn't have had to have been like that if there was a more diverse grouping of trees done. Now, I will say this, nobody ever planted that many ash trees. Ashes are prolific reseeders, so most of our ash tree areas were all created by the ash trees themselves. One of my goals with trees this year, now I've got, I'm going to tell you one thing and then completely contrast it, but I would like to really be on the lookout for more native trees to plant here. Especially with trees, I really see the value of investing in a native species if it's appropriate for the area. So I am going to be on the lookout for some native trees to add probably to our wooded area. I'm also going to be buying trees for other areas, including I want to continue our hornbeam hedge, which is growing along the east side of our property. I added 3 to it last year. I'd like to budget to add another 5 to it. I think if we might even be able to, one of these years maybe we'll just budget to finish it and be done with it, because we've just been adding them, which means of course the hedge is going to grow kind of at an angle for a while. And then the last thing I'm really thinking about this time of year is my containers. I don't like to go into spring not knowing exactly what's going to be in almost every container, at least my main containers that are going to be on the front of the house. I get real nervous because I like to know exactly how many plants I need of each thing. Now, these things have to change. Sometimes you can't find exactly what you need, or you just change your mind, or you buy the plants and you realize it's not really that great of a combination. So containers are really at the forefront of my mind right now. I also really have decided that I really don't like repeating things. The garage container I've liked very much the last 2 years. It's very successful. I might have actually sort of hit the pinnacle of how good that container is going to look. And yet I don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again, because what have you gained from that? In fact, I take a lot of webinars and watch a lot of garden talks over winter. And I just took one with Fergus Garrett from Great Dixter the other day. You might be able to buy it on replay. It was well worth the money I spent on it. And in it, Fergus really gets into the philosophy of gardening, which more and more I'm appreciating. And the real takeaway from his garden, from that talk that I had, other than any specific plant or specific plant combination, there were 2 takeaways that I had from that talk. And the first one was, what is the fun of repeating the same thing year after year after year? What have you learned? What have you gained from that? Yes, what you plant might not be as successful as the year before, but you already know that was successful. So why are you repeating that? So when we're talking about our own personal gardens, we have the latitude to do that kind of thing. If you're talking about, say, a garden that is being designed in front of a business or something, sometimes you need to go with the tried and the true, and experimentation is not necessarily part of that equation. But when we're talking about our own gardens, like, isn't the fun in trying new things? So I've always felt like that, but I feel better about it now in hearing that even at a place like Great Dixter, even if they don't really know how a combination is going to work, they'll do that over something that is tried and true and they know will work, because it's a learning experience and it's fun and it changes it up, and we're better gardeners because of it. The other thing that I took from Fergus's talk is something is just sort of reinforcing an idea that I've shared with you many a times before, and still think, which is that the only person who has to like your garden is you. And I think we all know that deep down, but at the same time, we want other people's approval. And I will say that my garden, when I worry too much about what other people think about my garden is never better for it. I don't make moves that I would have made, and I avoid changing things up. It's not as interesting. Last year, there was a lot of editing that I didn't do because I knew that there were some things happening in the garden, and I was afraid to take a chance to try something different. Instead, I stuck with something that I wasn't sure was working, and I have some regrets over that, to be honest. So I would say this year, and I would leave you with this message too, is go with your heart and just try it. You are the only person who needs to worry about what your garden looks like. And as long as you like it, that is literally the only thing that matters. So when you're planning your garden for the new year, think about what you would like. What inspires you? What will really get you excited for the gardening season? Not necessarily what is safe and what you know will work, because that might be okay sometimes, but sometimes it's fun to do something just to please yourself. All right, well, that was a little bit of garden philosophizing, which wasn't really supposed to be part of this, but these are all the things that are going through my head right now. Not all of this will happen, but some of this might happen. And I think the exercise of just recognizing areas that need to be on watch is a good one for every gardener to go through. So if you do garden planning for your garden this time of year, I'd really love to hear about what you're thinking about. Like, what are the main points that you're thinking about in your garden this year? And what are things that you either know you need to deal with or you're thinking about changing up? Because we all have different challenges in our garden. So I'd love to hear what yours are and what you're doing about them this year. All right, have a great day in your garden, planting your garden, whatever you're doing with your garden right now. And we'll see you soon. Thank you for watching.